following is a paid program, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent the opinions of the management of this station, and the views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, and callers of this program are solely their own. They do not represent or reflect the views, policies, or official position of ACA, its affiliates, or its staff. ACA does not endorse any statements made during this broadcast. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 31 Autism Today is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 31 Autism Today. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer with Anderson Center for Autism. And on behalf of Anderson Foundation for Autism, I'd like to welcome you to the podcast and introduce our guest today, Brigitte Shipman, who is an author of a book called A Mother's Guide Through Autism. And Brigitte, I'd like to welcome you. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I speak on this podcast to a number of, I love it because I get to talk to so many different people. Researchers, scientists, professors, a lot of parents, and a lot of people who are working in the field in different ways. And I've spoken over the years with a number of authors, not all of whom, but many of whom are parents of either children or adult children with autism or other neurodivergencies. And I love every one of the conversations because while the unifying factor is often parenthood, the differences in the way people kind of describe their backgrounds and their inspirations and kind of the direction their life has taken, whether purposeful or sort of more organically, is always really interesting to me. So I'm hoping that today you can tell us, to start, just give us a little background on yourself. Who are you? Tell us your story.
Sure. I have an educational background. So I have been in education for over 20 years and loved every minute. I've taught everything from preschool through high school.
Oh, wow.
I really enjoyed the different experiences with the different ages as I got older.
Yes.
And then I retired early to become a life coach and found my niche with autism. Although I resisted doing this work because I hadn't dealt with my own emotional I'm not going to say baggage. I think it's more of I just stored it. I didn't have the awareness that I even had it stored. So I just felt like, that just felt so heavy to me. But I kept getting signs. I believe in signs from God, the universe. And I went, okay, I need to listen. So I started coaching, started working with my son because of the coincidences, which I don't believe there are any actually. But I came home from the gym that I was currently doing personal training. I became a health and wellness coach first, quickly shifted. And I asked Joseph what he thought, because his teacher that he had when he was in junior high told me, she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm such a big fan of Joseph." Joseph was working at our local radio station. So this is a guy who had a very daunting future that really didn't talk very much. It was all echolalic, as we referred to it back then. And we didn't answer yes or no questions till he was 6 with flashcards. And now he's working at our local radio station, and he has a small fan base. It was awesome. So she said, you need to write a book. You need to help other parents figure this out. So I really thought about that. And I go home and I said, Joseph, would you like to start a podcast with me? What do you think about that? Because it's backgrounds radio, right? And I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing then. He said, absolutely. Okay. So that's how our teamwork started. And the why, the universe, God kept telling me that this is where my next career, or I want to say purpose, I would rather call it purpose, was taking us. I had done lots of work in our community, and that was rewarding, but it was also exhausting because I didn't know how to manage what, again, all the things that I was carrying around with me over the years. So I asked Joseph one day, I said, Joseph, what have I been to you? Because we didn't have a name for our podcast, right? And I said, what have I been to you all these years as your mom? And he said, no, he said literally nothing. And I didn't take that personal. I
Right.
know by now not to. And seconds later, he said, no, wait. I see you as a wise old man stroking your long white beard. And I see you giving me advice. I see you as wisdom. And I thought, oh, cool. And then in a second, he said, no, wait. You've been my tour guide of my life.
Oh,
You
wow.
have pointed me in the direction. So that's where Mother's Guide came from, was from what Joseph, in his own words, described that I, as his mom, have been to him, which kind of makes me I get verklempt all the time.
Yeah.
And so it was really important for us both. Joseph has a voice. Joseph has his own journey from
Mhm.
mine, separate. And so it was really important to us that, may I show you the book?
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, here's the cover. Here's me. And
Yes.
then it's a literal flip.
Yes. On the
And
other side,
and then Joseph,
through the eyes of the guided. I love that.
yeah, and he's a much better writer than me, by the way, and speaker, just to be clear. But those are his gifts, and I'm so happy that he gets to use them on this with me.
There's so much there, Bridget. That's a great story, and thank you for the background and sharing that personal part of your and Joseph's life so far. I'm stuck on you're the tour guide of my life. I mean, that is so like it just brings such an image right into my head of what is the role of a tour guide? Most people can relate to that. We've typically on a school trip, somewhere on a vacation, we've experienced a tour guide. Maybe even just seeing another group walking around someplace with a tour guide, maybe a place we know well. That
Mhm.
you're watching, you're listening, and what they're often doing
Yeah.
is usually through the art of storytelling, hopefully, a good one, is helping to bring something that otherwise feels maybe very foreign or hard to understand to make it a little bit more in context for you
Hmm.
as you're walking around. So I think that's quite amazing that that's how he described you. Also, I love the fact that he went from you being the stroking of the long white beard and wisdom to the tour guide, within just a few minutes. That's great. Is that from your perspective, when you think back on how old is Joseph now?
He is going to be 34 on April 16th.
All right. Well, happy early birthday to Joseph. But also, okay, so he's 34 now. So as you look back on when he was younger and, as far back as you want to go, is there a time in your life where you can remember feeling that was your role, even maybe without those exact words? But when he said that to you, did you have a moment of like, yes, that's
Yeah.
been what it's been? Or was it like really a new idea for you?
It wasn't a new idea, but it was an aha
Hmm.
in the fact that he and Joseph, I have to say this about him. If he is so profound
Hmm.
and he doesn't say a lot, but when he says something, it is like an aha moment, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. I thought, oh my gosh, Joseph, that is exactly what I have been, because I feel like I was a born teacher. You just know what your purpose is sometimes. I knew when I was 6 years old I was going to be a teacher. So the fact that he said that, just it was like an affirmation for me, as far as, okay, that's what I was hoping that I have been. I didn't want to be an overbearing parent. I didn't want to be a micromanaging parent. I didn't want to be a helicopter mom, although sometimes I was. Um, But overall, I just wanted him to have a life that he was proud of. And like all of us, all we want is for our children to be happy and to feel good about themselves,
Yep,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%. And I like that you said it was affirming.
Mhm.
That it was something maybe you had felt or hoped for, but maybe not put into words like that. But as soon as he said it, it was kind of like, yeah, that works. That's what I was trying to do, have been trying to do. So, all right. So that started you on this podcast and becoming sort of you seeing yourself as a mother's guide. And we're going to get into the details of the book in when we come back from break. But we just in the last couple seconds of this half of the show, bring us back to that conversation. And so he says that is kind of affirming for you. Was that the end of the conversation, or was there more? And then did you immediately start working on the podcast, or was it like we have to let this sink in? How does the dynamic work between the two of you?
We're really Joseph and I are very close, and over the years we have learned to how to communicate with each other, and so I could tell that in that moment we could schedule our first podcast,
Love it.
right? And we
Yeah.
did. So
Okay.
I would say a week later we started recording, and we still have the podcast, although Joseph has moved on from it, but he's still involved in it. So it was an instant like, oh, all right, let's go. We're ready.
That's great. That's great. I love that. I love that. That's why I said before about meeting so many people through doing this podcast. Everybody is so unique, and which shouldn't be a surprise, but it just is it's always informative to me and really important, I think, to get the word out because so many families might be listening, and what one parent says another parent might say that wasn't my experience at all. But they're waiting for someone to be like, yes, that's what it's like with me. It's like as soon as we hit on something that's mutual, we just go. And that's, and I care that this podcast, at least for some listeners, serves as a way to help people not feel alone and isolated, that there are so many people in this community who they can relate to. So we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to talk to you about the book and why the two covers and how that all came to be. And I love it. This is 1 in 31, the weekly podcast on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and we'll be right back.
Today alone, 5,370 people in the United States will be diagnosed with cancer. That's why Stand Up to Cancer funds and develops the newest and most promising cancer treatments. Stand Up to Cancer wants to provide you with every opportunity to join in this mission. By donating your home, land, or commercial property, you can help Stand Up to Cancer fund innovative cancer research. Stand Up to Cancer makes the process easy, and it may be tax deductible. Visit standuptocancer.org/giveproperty to learn more.
I'm Angela Bassett. As a first responder on screen, I know what it means to act fast in an emergency. In real life, the same urgency can save lives, especially when it comes to food allergy. For 33 million Americans, one bite can cause a life-threatening reaction. Now, there's a needle-free option, a new way to carry epinephrine. Know the risk, know the options. Be ready to act. Learn more at foodallergy.org/ready to act.
And now, 1 in 31, Autism Today, continues on Fox Oldies 98.9. This is a weekly community affairs presentation from the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 31, Autism Today. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and I'm talking with Brigitte Shipman, mother, author, former educator, life coach. Am I missing anything? Podcaster?
I think that's pretty well said. Thank you.
Okay. A woman of many talents. And so, Brigitte, thank you again for sharing so much of your background and your passion with us in the first part of the show. I'd love to get into the book. It's called A Mother's Guide. And that title kind of came from Joseph telling you years ago that you were his tour guide for his life, which I still love. I think that's great. So before I forget, let's talk about, remind people where can they go to get this book? Where is it for sale?
Sure, it is pretty much for sale anywhere, but Amazon has it for sale. and in Barnes and Noble, Walmart. I think pretty much all your big book folks have them. I've even heard that the book is in some of the smaller bookstores, which fascinated me. I'm like, cool.
That's great.
Yeah, but Amazon's probably the easiest.
It always is, isn't it?
Yeah.
No matter what you feel about things, they've really mastered the art of making it easy. Okay, so basically, you can find the book probably a number of places by doing a search. And remember, again, it's written by Brigitte Shipman. We will also put the information with all the correct spellings and the links in when we put this podcast out. So tell us about the book, what to expect. I did read a good amount of it. It's definitely not your average novel. You know, it's not that kind of book. It is definitely a guide. And I'd love for you to just describe who should read it and how can it be used? How should it be used? When you were writing it, what did you want?
I think really and truly, if you're anywhere on your autism journey as a parent, I think this book is helpful because, again, I was 50 before I started working with my emotions and some of the things that I had been through in the early years that I just never dealt with. Mm-hmm. I think it's great that moms and parents in general have therapists now and do that work. But I would say it is really a great book when you first hear those words that your child has a lifelong disability. And here you go. You know, I hear over and over and over again, and I remember my own experience with finding out that Joseph was autistic and there was no emotional support. It was just, hey, sign him up for these therapies and good luck. There was nothing. There was nothing. I didn't know what to do, right? You just you get overwhelmed, you get hit pretty hard, and you just start working to try to help your child. This book is for young Brigitte, okay? If you're out there and you're on this journey and you don't know where to turn, what to do, I literally wrote it from my mother's heart to your heart, and what I had wished I would have had at the beginning of my journey. That's who I've written this for. And I wrote a mother's guide prayer, and it literally just, you know, this book was so easy for me to write because it was living inside of me for many, many, many years before I actually had a chance to really share it. Mm-hmm. So if anywhere on the journey, it's great. If you haven't dealt with some of the emotions you may not even be aware of, right? That's why I always say, hey, meet yourself where you're at on any given day, because when you have that level of stress, when you have the grief that you may or may not realize that you're in, I want the parents to honor themselves and be kind to themselves.
Great message. And throughout the book, I think there are suggestions for even kind of phrases to repeat, meditations. I don't know if I would even call them activities, or just considerations, maybe might be a better word for, like, consider this, try this, or try something similar if that doesn't work for you. And I appreciated that when I was looking at it and reading through it, because for me, there are certain things that I just, knowing myself, I probably wouldn't do. But if I'm given the freedom to just consider some thoughts or some questions, and I can do it while I'm out on my daily walk, as opposed to sitting in a room, which would probably not work for me, it feels more accessible, and I'm probably more likely to try it. So I like the way it was, the suggestions were made. I know that there's a lot to talk about with the book, but I also want to make sure that we cover. You showed me the book before, but people listening to this podcast can't see it. So it's important to note that there's very purposely a front cover, or I don't even know if you refer to it as front and back, but there are two covers on this book. And and sort of two titles. So can you tell us about that? Try to describe it so people listening get a sense of why you did that and what that means.
Yes. The reason that really you get two books in one. You get the mom's perspective, the parenting perspective, and how to walk through the journey, much with joy. Look, this is a tough journey, but we can also feel joy at the same time. It's just like you said, it's a guide. It takes you through the beginning from the time you hear the diagnoses all the way to where you can have self-compassion and love, and you can get up every day and use your toolbox, right? It's building a toolbox. And you flip it over. So my half is healing, and Joseph's half gives you the perspective that, first of all, I think his book is more about, while I was on my knees in deep grief, Joseph was fine. So we had these two separate journeys, and I think it's really important for Joseph to have a voice in this, because after all, there wouldn't be a book. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without him. And I love, too, that we both designed our own covers.
Yeah.
Right? So if you look at mine, it looks like a healing side of the book. And when you flip it over, Joseph is such a great artist. And I love when you look at his half, his book cover, there's a man sitting on top of the mountain looking up at the stars in reflection. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, of course, Joseph would come up with that, because my son is so profound.
Yeah, yeah. And how cool the idea of healing and reflection, in the same text, but separated, as two different perspectives. Was that purposeful, or did that come through as part of the process? The idea of, these two different perspectives and the two different covers. Like, did you go into it saying we want to make it look like this, or was it like one of those other aha moments, like, oh, we should do that because that really works, that fits what we're putting out here?
Yeah, it originally, we did not have the idea of the two covers, but it kind of hit somewhere throughout the process as Joseph and I collaborated, and I had to show them that this could be done. They're like, oh, two covers, what? Let's make it as difficult as possible. But I wouldn't let it go, because it's a life metaphor. Yeah. It is what the purpose of this book is.
Yeah. Well, so we only have about a minute left or so to talk today. When people are considering purchasing the book, reading the book, using the book, what is your hope? What are you most hopeful about in terms of, you've put out this massive work that's so personal and profound? What are you hoping people take from it?
I hope people take from it that autism doesn't define you, whether you're the parent or the person that is autistic, that is just part of the ride, and that you absolutely can decide to enjoy the ride. You know what I'm saying? Because I do think that this autism journey, it literally is a flip, because I've done both. I did it with a lot of stress and hopelessness. And then when I use my tools, I am very happy. Even, sometimes when Joseph still struggles a little bit with that executive functioning, we're fine. What I know for sure, and this is what I want you to walk away with, is that no matter what, all is well.
Well, that's a very positive, affirming statement, and I'm happy to end on that note. So for more information, again, you can search for Brigitte Shipman's book, A Mother's Guide, and just check it out. It's not all story. There's actionable items in it, and it's written, I think, in a way that allows for interpretation in terms of what's working for you. But overall, very positive, affirming, message. And Brigitte, I really appreciate you coming on the show today to talk about the book and your experience with such a really interesting and cool background, and your positive hopes for whoever encounters this book and whatever comes in the future. So best of luck to you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 31 Autism Today, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.